The Plein Air Easton Podcast is brought to you by the Avalon Foundation, enriching the lives of those on the Eastern Shore of Maryland through the arts. Visit avalonfoundation.org for details on events, performances, and educational programming offered throughout the year. Today's episode is sponsored by JFM Enterprises, providing distinctive ready-made and custom frames and moldings to the trade since 1974. Visit jfm.net to view their catalog of designs.
I feel like Tim works kissing into every conversation right now. It's wildly inappropriate, but it's also hilarious.
Tim, you need to be kissed.
That is the understatement of the year.
That's a weird place to start.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Plein Air Easton Podcast. I'm Tim Wigan with...
Hi, I'm Jess Bellis.
Surprise. You never know. It's going to be Marie or Jess.
Surprise, it's me. I'm back.
Jess is back. Jess, no mask today. First time. This is March something, 12th, 7th, 8th, 9th.
I know. You have recorded some podcasts with Marie without masks on, but like, I forgot what you look like, Tim. You're really handsome.
Well, now you know she's... Oh, I have a face for podcasts, and you know she's lying.
Don't you dare call me a liar. We just had a really great conversation with Thomas Bucci, who I really like, and he just moved to Maine, so he's kind of like, he's got these eyes that were like so big and full of wonder. It's like he's landed himself in a whole new inspirational space.
Yeah, I felt like he's got a great spot up there, and if you're a twin, you might want to listen to this episode. And some good information here.
Hey, and you know what? If you like this podcast or any of our other podcasts, will you please do a review? I feel like we don't have enough reviews.
Oh,
like
God.
Us, review the freaking podcast.
Be careful what you wish for, Jess.
Oh, no.
This is Thomas.
They don't like me.
This is great wrap up, Jess. This is Thomas Bucci. Thanks for listening, everybody.
I found this kind of thing so strange, but I started doing online sketching classes. That's why I got this camera, so I could point it down at my desk and show people what I'm doing. But I found it so weird to talk to my computer by myself. I mean, I never really did a lot of this video chatting, but now it feels kind of normal. It's sort of like, we've even had friends over that way, like...
Right? No, we all had to. We need to stop because this is all the kind of conversation.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
We kind of got to start, right? We don't have to start. No starting.
Now
Jessica.
we do. Now we do.
I'm ruining it, Thomas. I'm ruining everything as usual.
I just, yeah. I mean, I want to talk about that camera too at some point.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, welcome to the podcast. We're talking with Thomas Bucci today. Thanks for coming on, Thomas.
Thanks. It's fun to be here.
So, Jess, you can start out, but I want to just maybe ask Thomas, what kind of hat, if you know Thomas, you see him around, he's always got one of these hats. What is that hat called? It's like a human-sized hat with a baby-sized bill.
It's a bicycling hat.
Oh, that's right. I think you told me that before, actually.
I'm a cyclist, but but I need something to cover my head, so I got used to it. Yeah, I get sunburned otherwise.
You wear it all the time?
No, not all the time. But
no. I was gonna say. I think like.
Have you seen him with his hat off?
I can't think of a time when I've seen him with his hat off. I probably have.
In the next podcast.
I probably have. Thomas, it's so good to see you and to be with you again after a few months since we saw you at Plein Air Easton. I guess I always like to start at the very beginning. Again, I think it's sort of my fascination with early childhood development. But like, tell me when you thought you were an artist. Like, did you paint and draw from when you were really tiny, or is it something that evolved over time?
Yes, started from the very beginning. And I'm the only one in my family, or even extended family, so I don't know where it came from, but maybe it was my neighbor who actually was about 5 years older than me, who was a great cartoonist. And he did cartoons for the local paper when he was pretty young, but he taught me how to draw Fred Flintstone and Charlie Brown, and I saw him just sit down and draw that without looking at any reference, and I thought, I want to be able to do that. I can still do that. But I think maybe that got me interested in the idea of pencil and paper and drawing.
And where did you grow up?
New Jersey. All the way in western New Jersey. Looking out my window, I could see the Delaware River, which I've just moved. I think, as we talked about before the podcast, I've just moved to Maine, and I'm back on the river again, and that makes me really happy to look out my window and see the Maguntacook River, and slowly going by.
I feel like when I think about a lot of your art, I see cityscapes in my head, and maybe it is because of all the time that you were in DC, and also some of the things I feel like you're drawn to in our local landscape. But like now you're in some place that feels more rural. How is that affecting the way that you're painting? Do you feel new inspiration? Am I correctly characterizing your book of work?
Yes. No, absolutely. It's almost all buildings, and I have a history of architecture, so I was an architect, and come from a family of people who build, who are builders, so and that's a lifelong interest. But painting subjects aren't as important to me as just the principles of painting, and so I think it applies to a still life, a natural landscape, a built environment landscape, or a portrait. It's the same sort of rules rules is the wrong word. It's the same sort of principles that apply to what makes a good painting.
So let's go back. Let's go back. So like, cause you're like, oh, I was always an artist. And then you're like, oh, but I was an architect, which is an art form in and of itself. But yeah. Did you feel like that was the path that you had to take because it was the way to like financial stability, or were you called to architecture? Like, walk us through your training a little bit.
Well, that's a really interesting irony in my life, is that I went to art school, and in art school, traditional art, as we know it, was discouraged in the 70s, and so most people found some sort of alternate path. And so many of the artists that we know became illustrators or graphic designers or something like that. And I chose graphic design. So I did that, went to New York, became a graphic artist, and I was pretty excited about the possibility of making a living as an artist. But the myth was quickly dispelled when I started working in ad agencies in Manhattan and found that, the work was... I can't even describe it.
What do you mean? Describe it. What do you mean?
I think the full weight of it came down on my head one day when we got this tear sheet in the office, where when you did an ad and it got placed in a magazine, they'd send you they'd tear it out of the magazine and send it to you. And it was from Lab Animal Monthly magazine. And there was my ad for a person who built cages for mice. And we were placing an ad in a magazine called Lab Animal Monthly. And I thought, I need to do something else with my life. This is not going well. And it paid well. But like all things that you don't really want to do, the money's better, the least desirable that the job is. You know how that goes. Anyway, I went to MoMA one afternoon, which was right in the neighborhood of all these ad agencies, and I saw this exhibition of architectural models, and I suddenly realized that's what I really wanted to do. And so,
and I'll say, this is a podcast that you can't see Thomas, although he's got a really killer camera that we should talk to him about some. But he also does have some architectural models behind him. It's like he's validating that he has the. he's like, oh yeah, those right there. He does the little white ones that you like. Again, that you think about. I went to Virginia Tech, so there's a big architecture school there, so I can think about all of the labs there that had all those little tiny models. Sitting on the tables, and he certainly still has them behind him. So did you go back to school to learn how to do that then?
Yeah, so I left Manhattan, moved to University of Maryland, where I started architecture school, and that's how I ended up in the DC area. And I loved architecture school. It was great, and I practiced for about 7-8 years. And then, it's tough. I opened my own practice with a classmate of mine. We worked for a while, but it's really tough to make ends meet. And so I lived on Capitol Hill, and there's a market there on Capitol Hill called Eastern Market.
Yep.
You guys know about that?
I sure do.
It's like a weekend outdoor arts and crafts and flea market. And I used to walk there every single weekend. And I started thinking, I wonder if I could get a little table out here, because lots of people like the sketches, the architectural sketches I used to do. My clients loved them and always wanted to buy them from me. And so I thought, I wonder if I could sell some architectural sketches of the Capitol and the Library of Congress. And I started doing those, and they became a huge hit.
Oh, that's
and
so cool.
So the irony is that I actually ended up making more money doing that on weekends than I was making as an architect.
That's amazing.
And I couldn't believe how lucrative it was. And so I just kept going with it. And then after doing that for a few months, I thought, well, I've always loved watercolor. Maybe I can introduce that. And so I started doing watercolors. And
with no training or calling upon the training that you had gotten when you were in art school. I mean, like, I appreciate when artists were like, oh, so then I just like picked up watercolor.
Right.
Like, do you know what it would look like if I just like picked up some watercolors and was like,
probably like mine.
Let me see if I can integrate watercolor into what I'm doing. Like, that's just not something that like people can do, really.
Well, let me say that the watercolors I was doing then, even though people liked them, I don't think they were very good.
Spoiler alert, if you have one of Thomas's early work, perhaps talk to him about an exchange or an upgrade. Discounted upgrade.
I'll buy him back. But no, sometimes I would in the neighborhood over the years, people would say, oh, we have your work in the house. And I'd go and see it and think, ooh, can I replace that? Or don't tell anyone that's mine.
The early works. Thomas Bucci, the early works.
Well, what was wrong with them, Thomas?
I had a lot to learn. And so doing that over the years, I learned a lot. But I really started to learn a lot once I started taking workshops.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, how did you learn? Like, what is the process? Because I think, I forget, it was on an earlier podcast, and they were like, just painting more the same way, painting every day, and not really getting connected to a workshop or to a teacher, or, you can just continue to be better at making the same mistake.
That's said perfectly. I mean, I've played tennis all my life. I'm not great at it, but I'm okay. And one day, one of my tennis buddies and I were out in the court, and there was a guy on the other court by himself, and he said he was a teacher, and he called us over and he goes, my student didn't show up, but I'm here. Do you guys want a free lesson? I'm like, sure. So he showed us just a couple of simple things about the serve, about not gripping the ball too tightly, just resting it in your palm and tossing it. And all of a sudden it became, wow, I've been doing this all my life the wrong way.
Right.
And so my serve improved like 100% in one day.
What's the difference between holding the ball tightly and holding it loosely when you throw it up?
Well, if you're gripping the ball before you toss it, then you have to time the release of it along with everything else, along with the racket and the lifting motion. You have to time all of that perfectly. If it's resting in your palm, all you have to do is toss it. You don't have to get your fingers in part of the...
Right, gotcha.
You're eliminating a step.
So does that translate to a paintbrush?
It's very similar parallels between painting and where you keep doing the same thing wrong. And with watercolor, there's a whole lot of those pitfalls that it goes counter to your instinct. If somebody shows you, do not do that, all of a sudden, in 1 week of a workshop, you can improve what might have taken years to find on your own.
Right.
Were there some teachers that were particularly influencers for you when you sort of made that move to watercolor?
Yeah.
You're just not going to, they're a secret. He's not going to tell us
right,
who.
yeah.
Because then other people will go and get those skills.
You told him.
Andy Vincent is a great teacher. Joseph Zubukvich. Yeah.
And how did you get connected with these classes? Like, because you're in the DC area, like they were through an organization, through a school. Like, how did you find your way?
Chesapeake Fine Art Studio, I took one.
Oh, yeah.
Others, I traveled for them because, you have to find these people. You have to catch up to them, and their workshops usually fill up quickly.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And tell me about how then you found your way to plein air painting. I mean, you kind of were doing it. You were plein air sketching, and then you were taking watercolor. You just had to get a name. You just needed a name to go with what you were already doing. Is that kind of it?
Yeah. Somebody saw me once painting outside. I think it was in New Orleans. And I didn't have a setup or anything. I just would sit in a park bench with a, easel on my lap, or just a piece of a watercolor block. And she goes, you're plein air painting. And I thought, well, that sounds very snooty. I'm just painting outside. It's just painting. But I think that might have been the first time I heard that expression.
It was the first time we heard it when they brought the festival idea to us as well. So that's definitely
Thomas. It sounded snooty to us too.
But it's funny how it's really taken off. I don't know if it's taken off in the last 20 years, or if it's just that you heard the name and you're like, because there's plein air everywhere now. So I mean, there's probably plein air in New Orleans, and there obviously was for the person who was. We've had one person here. We do 250 concerts in a year. We've had one artist who's come in and who knew what plein air painting was, and it was Jasmine Williams, who was this year. She was like, "Oh, plein air! I love that! I love that!" I know a bunch of artists from the DC area, so it makes sense that it's been a hard term to market. It's been a hard. I mean, we've talked about that a lot. We had to get away from saying plein air it took us 13 years to do that. So, that's great, Thomas. And just as a tie-in, were there a lot of people around DC, these guys that were architects or businessmen or lawyers or that were painting outside on steps in just freelancing? Because I was on a date with someone. We were walking out of the Smithsonian, and I met a guy who was painting on the steps of the Smithsonian, and I'm like, is this Thomas that I met? I don't know, because he was like, yeah, I work in an office all day. I do this, to like on my lunch hour or whatever, and go out and do that type of work. And he was like, this is what I truly love to do. I hope to become a painter one of these days. So your story rings really familiar to me.
Yeah. I don't know what I would rather do. I can't really think of anything I would rather do than what I'm doing now. Other than I did want to be an astronaut when I was really little. But then when I found out how small the capsule was, I decided, no, I don't think I'd be happy in that little box.
Yeah, no, if it's the fantasy and the reality of being an astronaut, I think are like really wildly different.
The choice is astronaut, plein air painter.
Right.
But I was 10 years old in 1969 when they walked on the moon. So that, like almost every kid my age, I think, had some kind of fantasy about wanting to do that.
Sure. Yeah. But you're claustrophobic, I guess.
Sorry?
Are you claustrophobic?
I wouldn't say that necessarily, but the idea of 2 weeks in one of those little capsules.
2 weeks? Some people are up there for like 2 years.
Now,
it's like not a joke.
It's the opposite of plein air painting, where you move from your maybe spacious studio to the entire outdoor world.
Let's talk about that for a second. And I don't want to dwell on it, but I do feel like as we are coming out of the pandemic, in some ways we're just like moving forward and like not acknowledging the fact that the last 2 years have been incredibly challenging and stressful and complicated. And like you, like a lot of other people, had to sort of retool and shift. Can you talk about your pandemic experience some?
Yeah.
He's like, no, I don't. None of us want to talk about that.
Why would anyone want to do that?
Stop it. Please don't ask me.
If you don't have that office experience, then you're already at home a lot.
Right.
I was probably affected less than a lot of people, but I did have to learn Zoom, as we all did, and do
Skype
classes online, which I kind of enjoyed that once I got into the swing of it. But I'll be very, very happy to go back into a class again and have a room full of students in person.
Yeah.
So far, that hasn't happened yet.
But we're getting closer and closer. No, before we started recording, we were talking about how strange this whole, like, let's talk to each other on screens was a couple of years ago, and how we can have happy hours like this now.
Right.
You know, that the shift it's not like fully complete in that I still would much rather share a beer at a real bar with you or a cup of coffee at Rise Up. But the notion that we can sit here and look at each other and have this conversation is an evolution, and the fact that you were able to teach and do demos during the pandemic does show an innovation at the very least.
Yeah, or just the fact that we'll say that we're going to have friends over, and we're really talking about having them on FaceTime.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I think the images are going. I see it like being like Star Trek. Really, I mean, I think that you're going to walk into your house, and 5 or 6 years, you're going to hit a button, and your face is going to pop up. It's going to look like HD, and it's going to be even better than talking on the phone. I think. I'm not positive about that, but that's kind of the way I see it sort of happening. So this has been great so far, Thomas. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back more with artist Thomas Bucci. Thanks for listening to the Plein Air Easton Podcast.
The 18th annual Plein Air Easton Competition and Festival takes place July 15th through the 24th, 2022, when 58 of the top plein air artists of our time will spend 1 week in Easton, Maryland, competing for thousands of dollars in prizes. Immerse yourself in a week of art exhibits, receptions, free demos, and panel discussions. Purchase exceptional and brand new art for that blank wall. Come for the art and make your summer memories at Plein Air Easton. The full event schedule can be found online at pleinaireaston.com.
Oh, we're getting the thumbs up, Thomas. We're killing it. How are we doing, Thomas? You like talking to us?
Always. I'm so happy I'm coming back to Easton this year.
Good.
How come?
Let's come back and say that.
We're rolling.
Oh my
We're
God.
rolling. We're
Tim
rolling.
hates me. Tim hates me, Thomas.
It's not me, it's the producer.
Nick hates me.
That.
All right, he's so looking forward to coming
That's
back
right.
to Plein Air
It
Easton.
is what it is. It is what it is.
So, Thomas, are you looking forward to coming back to Plein Air Easton?
No.
Good.
It's too damn hot. That's why. It's hot. It's far. The mosquitoes. See, now that Thomas is living up in Maine, this could be the last time we ever see him at Plein Air Easton, because it's going to totally change his
Especially in
psyche.
the summer, yeah.
Yeah, he'll be like, why on earth would I come to Easton in July if I can stay in Maine in July? Coastal Maine in July.
It is really nice here in July. Oh, yes.
Yes. It's,
Anyway, we're not on the air. This isn't being recorded.
Now it's not.
Now it definitely is.
I also don't mind talking about here. I mean, I'm so excited about being here.
So
It's
let's talk about it. You and your wife made this major shift. You were like, okay, you were describing it to me as, this is the place we love to vacation. Why the heck are we just not living here? Is that like how it evolved?
Yeah, but then we came in the middle of winter, and
Yeah.
we're like, oh.
I was going to say.
No, it's beautiful here in the winter. I love winter, and I haven't seen a real snow like the snows we've had here. I see that in people's paintings when I look online. I haven't seen snow in DC like that for 5 years maybe.
Sure.
It's beautiful. I mean, so right here, this is where the mountains meet the ocean, where the Appalachian Range ends.
Okay.
Right behind me is the last Appalachian before the ocean, the last big mountain, and then on the other side of us is the harbor. And it's all about a 10-minute walk.
That's incredible. It sounds incredible.
I love getting up in the morning and walking the dog either at the ocean or around the harbor or up the mountain or along the river. It's incredible. I mean, I can't believe.
I got to say.
Wait, is the dog as excited about the snow as you are?
Dog loves the snow.
All right, good.
It's a St. Bernard.
She actually eats the snow.
But I gotta tell you, you know, these are, just for inspiration for the people who are listening, like, you know, you were sitting in New Orleans doing a painting, and someone comes up and says plein air, and now you're buying a house on the side of the Adirondacks or the Appalachians with a harbor on the other side. I mean, how you planned well for this? I mean, and you're selling paintings doing this. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great because
plein air painters around here, many of them have done Easton. There's a good community of artists. Yeah.
Well, just, you know, when you said you started out, it was frowned upon. It was not. You don't become an artist. I mean, we've talked to a lot of people, not a lot of people, but several artists who had the same sort of thing where their parents are kind of like, I don't really think you should do that. You know, I think you should go for something that is, you know, more. And I think it still happens to some extent. I mean, I know it's a lot different now. Everybody, you can be what you want to be, right? I mean, but back in the 70s and 80s when you were coming up, you were told, like, honey, I don't think that's a really good idea. You're never going to make any money. And, you know,
it wasn't an unreasonable thing for a parent to be worried about. I mean,
right.
The kid wants to be an artist. It's not easy. And when I went to school in the mid-70s, the art teachers even discouraged us from that as a career. But I wanted to. Let me tell you this. Are we on right now?
No, we're not on at all. No,
we're always on, Thomas. Keep talking.
When we're on, I'm going to tell you a funny story.
We're on. Do it.
Go ahead. We're on. Yes, we are on.
So when I went to art school, I went to. I wanted to be in the painting. What do you call it? The painting program. And painting then was pretty much all abstract expressionism carried over from the 50s. That was what people were still doing, or even more removed from painting, which was installations and experimental art. Everything was experimental. The first day of the class, the teacher asked all of us who our favorite artist was. And so I was thinking Andrew Wyeth, or maybe Norman Rockwell, and a few people ahead of me said Norman Rockwell, and the whole class laughed, and I thought, oh geez,
right.
Well, I'll try Andrew Wyeth, and so I said Andrew Wyeth, and the teacher said, he's not a painter, he's an illustrator.
So interesting.
What's the difference? And again, the whole class kind of laughed. So I thought, this isn't for me. But I stayed with the program for a year, and then I went to graphic design.
Thomas, how often do you paint or draw or sketch? Is it a daily exercise for you, or is it when the spirit moves you? I mean, it is your full-time work at this point, correct? So you do have to work it like a job.
Has been for a long time, because when I was selling my work at that market in D.C., I was working at it all the time, and then I started doing the outdoor festivals, the street festivals. And, again, I was doing it full time. But do I paint every day? No. I don't find that possible. There's so much else that has to be done. And if you're talking about like right now, I barely have any time to paint at all. Moving from DC to here has been a huge undertaking for the last 6 months. And it's like I grab a window of time here and there to get a painting done. That's about it.
Until you get your feet under you and really settled.
Once I get in, even then, painting every day, I find that almost impossible to maintain.
So let's talk about what the festival experience then is like. I mean, certainly you have done a number of plein air painting competitions, not just Easton. I personally believe that Easton is one of, if not the most grueling one out there. We are many days, we are a lot of heat, there's a lot of pressure. But has that been your experience? Like, talk to me a little bit about how do you train to paint in a festival setting if you're like, it's impossible to paint every day, Jessica, and I'm like, come to Easton and paint every day.
Painting every day of your life. When someone says paint every day, I think that's 365 days. Painting every day for a couple of weeks at a festival, that is a joy.
Got it.
But I remember when I came to Easton for the first time, and I was pretty nervous. It was only my second plein air event. And
did you know it was a big deal, or did you feel like it was a big deal that you got into Easton? When you say you were nervous, why were you nervous?
I didn't know it was a big deal until somebody called me and said, hey, you got into Easton. another plein air artist. And I said, oh, good. And she goes, no, that's huge. And I said, oh, I didn't know that. I mean, to me, it was something in the area that seemed local. So I thought, I'll apply to that.
And now hundreds of artists across the country are like secretly hating Thomas Bucci. No, just kidding.
But I remember, Jess, you at the introduction said, don't worry about this. You only have to do 2 paintings.
Right.
And that immediately put me at ease. I thought, I have 10 days to do 2 paintings. I can do that.
I always like to hear the like feedback about what resonates, and because you never really know. So that's interesting. Like just being able to let that energy, let some of that stress go.
Well, I didn't really know. I didn't quite have a handle on what it was going to be expected of me. I did notice that everybody here, that everybody that was there were people who I was familiar with from the magazines.
Right.
And I thought, okay, so this is going to be competitive. But that didn't make me nervous. I was only afraid that I would come off looking like a real amateur, or that my work wouldn't measure up to what other people were doing. And so when I put it in perspective, you really only need to complete 2 competition paintings. Then I thought, okay, I can do that. And interestingly enough, the very first 2 paintings that I did that first year were the ones that I used as my competition pieces.
Interesting.
I kind of went downhill from there.
Well, you can overthink a lot. I mean, I think that, in the whole like tips and tricks and how to be successful at the competitions or anything in life, really, you can overthink it. You can overwork it. You can get in your, like the second you get in your head about some things, you can find yourself in a paralyzed state. Or maybe that's just me who's so often paralyzed. I don't know that I can project my insecurities on everybody else, but I've certainly found myself there.
You can psych yourself out. I mean, that's true. You learn that from sports and from other things that you have to, how many people have said that? You have to kind of get in the zone, which to me means tuning out distractions and not to think about whatever worries you and just focus on the task at hand. And when you do that, then it's just you against yourself. You're not, if you're running a race, you're not running against somebody who may be the fastest runner in the world. You're just trying to beat your own best time.
Well said.
Does a festival feel like sort of like a vacation in any sort, or how do you prepare for it, that sort of thing, Thomas? I mean, or is it even harder work than what you do on a daily basis trying to make your living?
It doesn't feel like work to me, Tim. To me, it's like, it is nice to go places, so I like to travel. And on top of that, and once you get to know people that are doing it, now you're like a reunion with your friends. Mm-hmm. And then in addition to that, you get to paint, which is what I really wish I had more time for, to just paint, to not have to think about advertising my work or maintaining my website or social media, or even just buying frames and all the things that you have to do, buying supplies.
No, that's totally a theme of some of these podcasts where I feel like we hear this, is it's like these festivals do carve out time where you can only focus on the painting. And I think that people don't really realize how much business of doing artwork is in being a professional artist. And when you do go up to these events, you can sort of like put a time out on the business of art, which you have to maintain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so right before one, especially a bigger one, there's a whole lot of that preparation where you're making sure, do I have all the materials I need? Do I have a second easel in case my easel breaks? All of that.
Right,
even do I have a room to stay in? I traveled to Michigan last year, and going across the country, somewhere around Ohio, I realized I wasn't going to make it any further and had to stop. Every hotel was booked.
Oh, no.
There wasn't a hotel for miles and miles around. And, I finally, I was talking to another artist on the phone, and she said, I can't find a place either. I mean, it's crazy. And the town was called Twinville that I stopped at, and there was a twins convention. So every hotel miles of Twinville had twins booking double rooms.
That must have been a little Twilight Zone-ish. I feel like you're like, you can't make that up, really.
You see these like all these duplicate people. Alternate universe.
That is like an alternate universe.
It seems like it'd be a good place for portrait work.
A great exhibition of twins doing self-portraits of their other twin.
Or at least like their sittings could be shorter, right? Like if you had a long pose, you could just like tag one out and bring the other one in.
Or say once you got the first person down, you could say, I got it.
or the twins doing each other, it's sort of like can you paint a self-portrait of someone else? Only if you're twins.
Right. This has turned very riddly all of a sudden. Thomas, when you come to these festivals, how many, like you talk about those 2 competition paintings, do you know what you're going to paint when you come, or are you driving around for inspiration, or is it a combination of both? Like how much planning, I mean, aside from making sure you've got all the goods with you, how much planning are you doing in terms of content or composition?
Yeah. No planning for subject. In fact, you can look at the exact same spot 4 hours later, it's a totally different view. So for me, it's just going out, looking around, and there it is. You see something. The way the sun lands on the buildings, or just something. I don't know.
One of my favorite paintings that Thomas did that still like kind of haunts me is he did one of all of the town of Easton trash cans down an alley, and they all said TOE, 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 and I like totally loved it. It really resonates in my brain still, that one painting.
I'm kind of shocked that the painting of garbage cans never sold.
Yeah, no, I'm just shocked. Like, I'm kind of like sad that I didn't go for it, because it was like really like I can remember it so clearly, and that had to have been 4 or 5 years ago that you did that. Was that your first year in Easton that you painted those trash cans?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're still like clear as day in my head. I really remember them.
He's making a statement.
Do you think we're trashy here, Thomas? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, the town of Easton is toe,
right?
T-O-E, and so there's toe written on all of those pins. That's just something.
I knew it.
About that. Toe bins.
Thomas, if you had any words of advice aside from I think what you've already said, which is relax, you only have to paint 2 paintings. We have a number of people who are going to be coming to Plein Air Easton for the first time this year. Do you have anything that you'd say to them?
Specifically to Easton, or plein air events?
You can do both. Oh. You can do one and then the other. I don't know.
Do plein air events first.
For plein air events, yeah. I guess what you already said, that you have to prepare, and it takes time to make sure you got all your materials and stuff, so you're not scrambling and wasting time when you're there trying to buy art supplies or. And the second, much more useful advice would be don't overthink it. Like what we talked about before. Just let it come to you a little bit. And I don't know. I'm not a big advice giver. I feel like everybody figures these things out for themselves, and everyone has their own personality and the type of work approach that their personality dictates. Some people would definitely need to figure out exactly what they're going to paint first. I think relax. If more than anything, relax and let yourself get into the zone of focusing on nothing but painting.
Sounds dreamy, doesn't it?
And go for it. Yeah. Don't worry about whatever else is bothering you.
Do you find that you hang out more now that you're kind of used to doing this? You get to hang out with people, or because one of the great things about this, as Jess was saying earlier, the podcast for us is actually getting to know the painters, because we don't really get to know them. I think Jess and Al maybe, and Marie maybe know them on a little bit more of a level, but we don't really. I have interviewed people that I didn't know what they looked like. I just knew their name, or the other guy, Carl Terry, I had never seen the guy before in my life. And he's been.
Well, he had only been to Plein Air Easton once. Carl Terry is coming back to Plein Air Easton after many years of not being here, so that doesn't surprise me.
Do you find that you hang out a little bit more as you go to these things, and you've gotten used to the festivals? Or are you really working the whole time?
I found the artist crowd very welcoming and inclusive, and so almost right from the very first year, people invite you out to dinner and to join them painting. And so, yeah, that's one of the great things about all this plein air events that have been going on is this community.
Right. And you can talk shop with people who actually know the language and what you're going through to as an artist to make it.
Yeah. Good people. Artists are good people.
And then, Thomas, we're getting ready to wrap up here, but I just want to ask you, going back to that teacher who said, Wyeth was an illustrator, or that was the feeling that time when you were kind of coming up. What do you think? Where do you think plein air is on its ascension into importance at this point in the country, or I wouldn't say in the world? I only know about really Maryland and a couple other states. Where do you think plein air is on its ascension as an art form?
Well, the galleries in this town, there are about 4 of them right downtown, and they're almost all. One of them is exclusively plein air work. Another one is a guy who used to live in the Maryland area, he's painted at Easton, who now has his own gallery, and a lot of the work he shows is plein air work. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that. That's for sure.
Right.
So more and more galleries are showing plein air work. So I'd say that's an upward trend for public opinion and public interest. Right. In this kind of work, yeah. I mean, maybe the public has always been interested in this work, but the galleries have not been showing it. From like the 50s and 60s onward, traditional art seemed to take a back seat.
Mm-hmm. And how much do you love it, Thomas?
I don't know. How can I? Or maybe I can, as my niece said, I love you this much, and spread her arms.
That's awesome. Thomas, it was so good to talk to you. I hope that you continue to get settled into your new home and find your way to getting some more paintings happening. And I can report to everybody that he just seems really happy in his new space and motivated and excited by what he's looking at. So you sort of feel like you're in an inspired space, Thomas, and it's good to see people feeling that way. So thanks for taking the time to talk to us, and we'll see you in July.
If you're out there and you come...
and if you can do anything about the weather.
Yeah.
Try to tone it down a little bit.
No, we're going to take it up a notch this year. Hottest ever, Plein Air Easton. We're going to bring it.
Nobody's going to mind because we won't be in a pandemic anymore.
Right. It'll feel cooler because hopefully we won't be wearing masks.
Oh right.
That will be nice. Although last year was pretty much back to normal.
We really were so stinking lucky with our 2021 festival. It's like we thread the needle when everybody was sort of feeling safer again before Delta came and walloped everybody back. And it's like we got like this brief moment of quasi normalcy, and it it was the 2-week period that Plein Air Easton was happening, and then it sort of all came unglued shortly thereafter. It was we were so lucky, but we're certainly looking forward to a year of us all being together and just a real exceptional time. I can't say that enough how excited I am about some of the plans we have for this summer at Plein Air Easton. So we look forward to seeing you there, Thomas. And it's been just awesome talking to you. I'm sure there'll be a lot of hugging and kissing this year. And if you happen to make it, there he goes. He's working the kissing back in. It's like he can't stop. It's come full circle. We started talking about kissing. Every conversation with Tim right now comes back to kissing. It's gonna be a crazy summer. If you come to Easton and you walk around town, just look for Thomas and the bicycle hat. Thomas and the bicycle. On my bicycle. And he may be on his bicycle. There you go. There you go. It was great to see you, Thomas. Thanks Thomas. Again. All right.
The Plein Air Easton Podcast is brought to you by the Avalon Foundation and was produced by Nick Richards. Our theme music was generously provided by Blue Dot Sessions, with additional episode music by Scott Gratton. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. You can learn more about Plein Air Easton at pleinaireaston.com.